July 5, 1941. Near Belgorod. German Panzer crews roll forward at dawn, the sun barely a thin line across the horizon. Engines vibrate with confidence. These men have spent 2 years fighting enemies whose tanks cracked open under a single well-placed 37mm shell. French armor, British light tanks, Soviet models from the 1930s, all different shapes, all the same result: penetration, fire, destruction. German doctrine feels proven. Their guns feel reliable. Their armor feels superior. So when a scout reports enemy armor ahead, no one is alarmed. A Panzer III commander even remarks, "Let's see which old model they bring us today." The crews know the script. They've lived it across Europe. The first tank appears at a distance, but something feels off. The silhouette is unfamiliar, the angle's wrong, the form too clean, too deliberate. It moves with a kind of heavy confidence, not the clumsy stutter of older Soviet machines. But at this range, German crews assume it's just another variant of something outdated, nothing their trusted guns can't handle. A gunner loads a 37mm armor-piercing round. He takes aim. He fires, and then everything breaks from expectation. The shell hits the front plate and bounces off. Not slows, not dents. It ricochets upward in a shower of sparks, whining into the sky like a thrown coin. Silence follows, but it is not the silence of surprise. It is the silence of disbelief. The German commander orders another shot, this time with urgency. Another hit, another ricochet. No armor of 1940 ever behaved like this. Inside the turret, someone mutters, "What is that thing?" But no one has an answer. The unknown tank keeps advancing. Now the Germans notice more details. The sharply sloped armor, like a steel wedge designed to split incoming fire. The wide tracks floating across mud that bogged their own vehicles. The deep, smooth growl of a diesel engine. Something the Germans had never expected the Soviets to use successfully in armor. It is, in every visible way, wrong. Wrong for 1941, wrong for Soviet industry, wrong for everything German intelligence claimed to understand. A second, then a third new Soviet tank emerges from the tree line. The German gunners fire again and again, but the battlefield feels reversed, as if the laws of armored combat no longer apply. The shells spark and glance off, leaving the Soviet machines unshaken. But the true shock has not yet arrived. One German tank opens fire with a higher caliber gun, a 50mm round this time. The kind that should punch clean through medium armor. The impact is louder, more violent. Dust bursts from the enemy hull. But when the dust clears, the tank is still coming, still alive, still aiming. Radio chatter erupts. Armor too strong. Shells ineffective. Enemy vehicle type unknown. A doctrine does not collapse in one moment, but it can fracture. And this is the fracture. Only after several terrifying minutes does recognition arrive. Only after seeing the enemy gun, thick-barreled, deadly, unmistakable, do the Germans understand they are not dealing with an upgrade or a variant. They are staring at a completely new generation of tank. This is the T-34. 45mm of armor sloped like a fortress wall. A 76mm gun that can kill any Panzer at combat range. A diesel engine giving range and survivability. Tracks wide enough to glide over the Russian steppe like a ship crossing waves. In one encounter, German crews learn a truth they were never prepared for. The Soviet Union has built a tank that outclasses theirs. Not slightly, not occasionally, but fundamentally. And as more T-34s appear along the tree line, A realization spreads across the German formations. A realization so heavy, it seems to press down on the very sound of their engines. The battlefield has changed. The rules no longer favor them. And the war they thought they understood has just become something else entirely. The German advance slows to a crawl, not because of terrain, not because of resistance, but because of uncertainty. A feeling unfamiliar to an army that crossed Europe in less than 2 years. Tank commanders begin adjusting their tactics on the fly, ordering their gunners to aim for tracks, vision ports, anything that might stop this new Soviet machine. But the T-34s maneuver with unsettling confidence, pivoting sharply, turning their angled hulls toward incoming fire as if they understand exactly how their armor works. A Panzer III attempts a flanking maneuver, accelerating to the side, turret rotating to line up a shot against the Soviet tank's thinner side armor. It's the maneuver that worked countless times before. But the T-34 reacts instantly, turning to meet it, keeping its sloped front plate pointed directly at the German gun like a shield forged with intention. The German driver curses under his breath. This enemy is not playing the old game. This enemy is rewriting it. Then the Soviet tank fires. The 76mm shell hits a Panzer III squarely. There is no bounce, no spark, no deflection. The round punches through the frontal armor, erupts inside the crew compartment, and the German tank is instantly reduced from a weapon to a burning steel coffin. The column halts. A second Soviet shot hits another German vehicle, cracking it open. Flames rise, black and oily. The battlefield, expected to be simple, has turned into a demonstration of technological imbalance. At regimental headquarters, radio operators collect frantic reports from across the sector. Enemy tanks faster than expected. Armor too strong for 37 and 50mm guns. Requesting heavier weapons. Unable to penetrate front armor at any angle. One message simply reads, "We need air support, immediately." German officers gather around maps, tracing lines, evaluating distances. They're trained, experienced, disciplined. But they are also human, and this morning has shattered something deep. Until now, German armor superiority was not just a belief. It was an identity. An advantage so overwhelming that it defined every plan they made. Now, in just a few encounters, that identity is cracking. An intelligence officer flips through field manuals, trying to match the Soviet tank to known models. None fit. None even resemble the thing crushing their forward units. He circles a photograph of an old T-28, shrugs, then crosses it out. The doctrine they brought into the East, the doctrine that won them the Blitzkrieg, suddenly feels incomplete, as if they had prepared for the wrong war. Meanwhile, on the battlefield, German artillery is brought forward. They fire high-explosive shells at the T-34s, hoping concussion might disable optics or damage tracks. Dust clouds billow, smoke covers the horizon, and the sounds of impacts echo across the steppe. But when the smoke clears, the Soviet tanks are still moving. Their armor, hardened steel manufactured under brutal Soviet conditions, absorbs the blasts better than anyone predicted. A crewman in a Panzer IV whispers to himself, "This isn't a medium tank, it's a monster." But the truth is even more unsettling. The T-34 is not a superweapon. It is a mass production design. Behind the lines, Soviet factories are preparing to build these machines by the thousands. Cheaply, ruthlessly, efficiently. The Germans don't know that yet. But the weight of that reality is already pressing toward them. Invisible now. Inevitable soon. more T-34s join the fight. They are not perfect. Their crews are often poorly trained, their radios unreliable, their optics inferior. Yet none of those flaws matter today. Because what the Germans face is not skill. It is not doctrine. It is raw, physical superiority. Armor that deflects, guns that penetrate, engines that endure. The core balance of armored warfare, firepower, protection, mobility, has shifted for the first time since 1939, and it has shifted decisively. By midday, the German advance has stalled completely. Officers who once spoke confidently now speak cautiously, choosing every word. They know what is happening, even if they refuse to say it aloud. Their tanks are outclassed, and somewhere on the edge of the battlefield, a Soviet commander, exhausted, undertrained, but alive, watches smoke rise from German wrecks and realizes something of his own. The Red Army, battered and bleeding, has just shown a glimpse of the war to come, a war where the T-34 will not be an exception. It will be the standard. By the afternoon of July 5th, German High Command begins realizing that the reports arriving from multiple divisions are not isolated anomalies. Panzer units in entirely different sectors are encountering the same mysterious Soviet tank. The descriptions match perfectly. Sloped armor, wide tracks, diesel engine, a gun powerful enough to destroy any German vehicle on the field. What began as a single unsettling encounter is now spreading across the front like a rumor with weight and consequence. Inside a field headquarters, officers gather around intercepted radio fragments and battlefield sketches made in haste by shaken tank crews. A young lieutenant lays a charcoal drawing on the table, a rough depiction of a low, angular hull with a large turret and pronounced track width. The room falls quiet. Even in crude lines, the shape is unmistakably modern, far more modern than anything the Germans expected from Soviet industry. One colonel, a veteran of the 1940 campaign, studies the sketch for a long moment. "This is not a reaction," he says. "This is preparation." The implication is chilling. The Soviets had this design ready before the war even began. Meanwhile, German technical teams attempt to capture an intact specimen. But the T-34s perform a tactic German planners did not foresee. They withdraw only when necessary, often faster than German tanks can pursue. Their wide tracks glide over soft terrain that bogs German panzers down, forcing recovery vehicles to drag them out, while the Soviet machines simply disappear back into the forests or across fields of tall grass. The Germans don't just lose firefights. They lose the mobility contest as well. Panzer crews begin adjusting behavior almost instinctively. Instead of rolling forward with head-on aggression, they start scanning the tree lines nervously, knowing that a single T-34 could be waiting in ambush. The psychological balance has shifted. The hunter now feels hunted. In one sector, a German tank battalion attempts to use high ground positions to counter the Soviet armor. They position themselves on a ridge overlooking a shallow valley. From there, their guns can fire at long range, a tactic normally decisive. But the T-34s use the landscape differently. Instead of charging the valley directly, they move along its edges, masking their approach with terrain folds, appearing briefly, then disappearing before the Germans can adjust their sights. It is a form of maneuver warfare Germany perfected. But the T-34 allows Soviet crews to mirror it almost naturally. When the Soviets finally rush the ridge, the German positions crumble. Their shells bounce. Soviet shells do not. The ridge, once an advantage, becomes an exposed stage for destruction. Back in Berlin, far from the front, intelligence officers begin compiling the first comprehensive assessments. They estimate this new tank must be heavy and expensive. Impossible for the Soviets to build in large numbers. It is a comforting conclusion, but a dangerously wrong one. They assume the T-34 is rare. In reality, Soviet factories are already capable of producing them in quantities Germany cannot match. And as more reports flow in, even the comforting assumptions begin to fracture. A battalion on the northern flank reports facing not one or two T-34s, but dozens. Another sector claims they counted at least 25 advancing together in a single engagement. A third describes seeing them alongside another shock. An even heavier tank, the KV-1, a steel fortress the Panzer III has no hope of damaging. To the Germans, it feels like an absurd reversal. They expected the Soviets to collapse under pressure. Instead, they find themselves confronting machines built with a logic their own industry dismissed. The T-34 is not refined. It is not elegant. But it is brutally effective. Wide tracks for mud, diesel engine for endurance, large gun for power, sloped armor for survival. Everything about it reflects the conditions of the Eastern Front, cold, vast, merciless. The T-34 is a weapon designed for Russia in a way German tanks never were. By early evening, as smoke rises across the steppe and damaged panzers are dragged back for repair, the German army confronts a truth it hoped to avoid. Its technological edge is gone. The battlefield is no longer predictable. And the war that began with unstoppable momentum is now grinding into something far more uncertain, far more dangerous. The T-34 has not just appeared. It has declared that the Soviets are fighting a different kind of war, one Germany did not prepare for, and one it may not be able to dominate. As the sun sets on July 5th, the battlefield grows quiet. But the silence is deceptive. It is not the calm of victory or the pause between predictable phases of battle. It is the silence of recalculation, the moment when an army realizes that something fundamental has shifted. German field officers gather around makeshift tables, their faces lined with dust and sweat, staring at casualty numbers that make no sense for a force that was supposed to be unbeatable. Panzer divisions report losses that would have been unthinkable just 2 weeks earlier. These are not the light losses of a normal engagement. These are the losses of a fight, where one side suddenly discovered it is technologically inferior. Entire companies report that their shells bounced harmlessly off Soviet armor. Crews describe being forced into close-range duels just to have a chance at survival. The Germans had never needed desperation tactics before. Now they're improvising them on the fly. One shaken sergeant writes in his logbook, "Our guns feel like toys. Their tanks feel like the future." And this is the core shock. The T-34 is not just a new tank. It is a preview, a glimpse of an armored war Germany is not ready to fight. Over the next weeks, this reality spreads far beyond the battlefield. Captured German documents later reveal a pattern of disbelief turning into grudging respect, and respect slowly turning into fear. Not panic, but a cold, analytical fear. The kind that professional soldiers feel when they recognize they have underestimated the wrong opponent. German engineers at the front request permission to ship captured T-34 wrecks back to Germany. But this proves harder than expected. The Soviets rarely leave them behind. Even heavily damaged tanks are often retrieved, repaired, and sent back into service. On more than one occasion, German troops disable a T-34, only to watch Soviet repair crews arrive at night, attach cables, and drag the machine away before dawn. It is humiliating evidence that the Soviets can sustain these vehicles in ways German logistics cannot. And then comes the revelation that truly disturbs German command. The T-34 is not only superior, it is simple. When engineers eventually examine a captured hull, they discover a design built for cheap production. The welding is rough, the machining is crude, but the effectiveness is undeniable. Where German tanks use finely crafted components requiring specialized industry, the T-34 relies on rugged, forgiving engineering that factories deep in the Soviet interior can mass-produce even under bombardment. This makes the German officers uneasy. Their own industrial base, though advanced, is not prepared for a prolonged war of attrition. One report to Berlin states bluntly, "The Russians can outbuild us in this class of vehicle." Meanwhile, on the front line, every engagement reinforces the same lesson. German tank crews develop new tactics, aiming for the rear armor, calling for anti-air support, or coordinating multiple vehicles to overwhelm a single T-34. Sometimes these methods work. More often, they buy time but not superiority. Nothing the Germans do fully restores their earlier confidence. By September, entire divisions begin adapting their planning around the threat. Panzer commanders choose routes not based on terrain or objectives, but on where T-34s have been sighted. Infantry units request more anti-tank guns, especially the larger 75mm pieces. Even the Luftwaffe, already stretched thin, shifts missions to suppress Soviet armor. But no matter how much the Germans adjust, the shift in momentum is unmistakable. This is not the unstoppable advance of June 1941. This is a grinding, contested struggle. The T-34's presence forces the Germans to slow down, reconsider, and react. Three things Germany never intended to do in the Soviet Union. In October, as weather worsens and the mud season begins, T-34s only grow stronger in comparison. Their wide tracks glide over terrain that immobilizes German panzers. The battlefield tilts even further in the Soviets' favor. German officers, once certain of a quick victory, now speak quietly about what must be done to counter this new armored threat. Their tone suggests an unspoken admission. The war is evolving faster than their army can keep up. Behind closed doors, senior German engineers begin discussing an idea they resisted for years: designing a completely new tank inspired by the T-34. That machine would eventually become the Panther, a direct acknowledgement that Soviet innovation had surpassed theirs. But in 1941, none of that exists yet. Only the shock exists. Only the slow, dawning understanding exists. The understanding that the T-34 is not a single battlefield problem. It is a systemic problem. A problem that touches doctrine, production, logistics, firepower, and morale. As German crews settle into their defensive positions for the long winter ahead, one thought hangs over them like the cold air itself. If this is what the Soviets can field in 1941, what will they field next? Germany entered the Soviet Union expecting collapse. Instead, on the fields around Belgorod, they found a machine that refused to die. And with it, the first undeniable proof that the Eastern Front would not be won quickly, if it could be won at all.